Hello, this webinar is being recorded. If you have any objections, please disconnect at this time. Thank you very much, and on behalf of the National Cancer Institute, I wish to welcome everyone to today's Implementation Science webinar. Before we get started, I'd like to make a few remarks about the logistics. All lines have been muted upon entry and will remain muted for the duration of the webinar. We encourage questions and comments. Questions can be submitted using the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Feel free to submit your questions at any time throughout today's conversation. We will be using the chat panel to share resources. Please note that you may need to activate the appropriate panel using the menu option found at the bottom right-hand of your screen. For better viewing of today's speakers, we recommend navigating to the View menu in the upper left-hand corner of your screen and selecting Hide Participants Without Video. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. David Chambers.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Anita, and thanks to everybody for joining us. Happy 2023. I think we can still say that even as we're well into January. I am particularly excited for today's discussion because I think I get to learn from three people who I've been learning from for a reasonably long time about the importance of really connecting, of integrating genomic medicine, genomic findings into clinical and community practice, which is something that certainly we've been engaged in as part of Cancer Moonshot at the NCI, but have more broadly been seeing the promise and really the example of genomics as that way to translate discovery into health. So as you can see, the three people who join me both on the video screens, but as well on this slide, are doctors Vence Bonham, Jeff Ginsburg, and Katrina Goddard, all of whom have played such pivotal roles over the years in helping us think through how do we not feel success comes from testing, but think about the implications of genomic testing and the pathways that follow toward the improvement of health, toward the improvement of healthcare overall. And so each of these three, I feel like I got to know first from all of the wonderful activities that NHGRI has been engaged in, the National Human Genome Research Institute, where Vence serves as acting deputy director. The Ignite initiative that Jeff had been a leader in, CSER, that I believe was where I first got to hear Katrina's expertise, and all of the genomic medicine meetings that I had the privilege to take part in at various points. And then a range of different efforts that my former colleague here at the NCI, Muin Khoury, who many folks know from his long expertise and his work at the CDC, in working with the National Academy of Medicine toward how do we do a better job of translating genomics into clinical practice, and what kinds of actions can we take to better the field. So all that has led us to today, which we hope will be a really wonderful conversation about these intersections, about how we take genomic medicine and really scale up toward the betterment of health and of healthcare. And so if you've joined us before, these kind of conversations are intended to be like a fireside chat. We pull up our chair by some warm fire, and we think about issues that might propel us forward as a field. And we really try and drive the conversation based on the kinds of things that you all want to know. So as Anita had mentioned, we would really love to see your questions, your thoughts, your comments. At one point, coming up very shortly, we'd love to hear your opinions. We're going to put out one of these questions not only to our esteemed panelists, but to everybody who's listening, because we'd love to get your take on what some of the challenges are that are getting in the way of us maximizing the promise of genomics as we target improvements in cancer and certainly in other diseases as well. So with that said, I want to welcome each of our wonderful speakers and start out, and I'll sort of rotate the order, but in this case, we'll start out with Vence. Oh, and here's a lovely picture of a fire in case you don't have access to one right now. So we'll start off with Vence, and then Jeff, and then Katrina, and we'll really talk a bit about, from each of them. Would love to learn a little bit about how each of you first became interested in the translation of genomics into clinical practice. Let me just take a quick pause before turning it over to Vence, realizing that while I noted Vence's current role, I skipped the fact that Jeff Ginsburg, who was at Duke for a long time, has joined us at NIH as the Chief Medical and Scientific Officer of the All of Us research program, which many folks are familiar with. And of course, Katrina Goddard has joined me here as our division director for the Division of Cancer Control and Population Sciences about 15 or so months ago. And so again, just great to have you in your current roles, but also to learn from your prior expertise. So with that said, Vince, can you kick us off? How did you first become interested in translating genomics into clinical practice?
So first, I just want to say thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation and this fireside chat. I really am pleased to be here and to have this discussion both with the audience and with my colleagues. So I first got involved in thinking about how to move genomics in a way to really truly benefit clinical care. When I was a faculty member at Michigan State University, I was in the Health Services Research section of the Department of Medicine, where we were conducting implementation science research and really focusing in on issues around how do we take evidence to provide equitable care in a variety of the areas. And I was first exposed to some of the work that was going on with the Human Genome Project at NHGRI and was involved in some research in collaboration with my colleagues at University of Michigan around some of these issues. And it was right at 1999, 2000 when I got involved. And so there was not the completion of the Human Genome Project, but it was clearly on the horizon. And so the question about, okay, as the Human Genome Project is completed and we start to see new treatments and drugs and development, what's really going to happen? So that's when I became engaged and excited about it and has now been involved for more than 20 years with regards to genomics.
Awesome. Thanks. Jeff.
Again, my thanks, David, for inviting me to be here today. I am quite certain that I will learn more from Vince and Katrina than they will learn from me in this discussion, but I'll give it my best. And my path in translational genomics has been, I think, fairly circuitous. I'm going to go back a little further than Vince. I was when I did my graduate training, first of all, I was trained in biophysics and studied physical chemical properties of lipids and lipoproteins and atherosclerotic plaque. And when I was doing my residency, it was right around the time that Brown and Goldstein won the Nobel Prize. It was 1985 for their discovery of the LDL receptor, and that, as you know, led to the development of drugs that are preventing heart disease, worldwide and impacting global health. So when I began my cardiology fellowship, I did a postdoc to retrain myself in genetics and molecular biology, which is where I saw, the Brown and Goldstein was really foreshadowing, I thought, the future. And I even started a lipid clinic where I could find extreme lipid phenotypes so I could potentially discover some of the things that alongside them that could actually impact heart disease and lipid disorders. Long story short is I actually left academia, went to a biotech company around the time the Human Genome Project was being completed. It was Millennium Pharmaceuticals, and I got involved in implementing pharmacogenomics into Millennium's clinical development pipeline. And where I saw the problem there was that we were so far removed from the patient that I moved out of industry and went to Duke University, where, as you mentioned, I was involved in NHGRI strategic planning for improving the practice of medicine and changing healthcare. That was the lofty goal. I still is. I was also, as you mentioned, involved in the NHGRI's Ignite network, which is an acronym that stands for Implementing Genomics in Practice, and that's also where I learned about implementation science for the first time, and also where I got to know Katrina fairly well. I also, as part of Ignite, was involved in some of the first genomic-guided clinical trials to look at APOL1 genetic variation in African Americans and its ability, that information to control hypertension in that population, as well as pharmacogenetics clinical trials in pain and depression. So my experience at Duke was phenomenal in terms of really introducing me to translation. And now I'm at NIH, where I constantly think about how is the All of Us research program really going to translate its findings to impact individual and population health. So I'm hoping today I'll learn more about how to answer that question even for myself. And thank you for having me, Heath.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks so much. Katrina, yeah, same question to you.
Great, yeah. So interesting to hear from Vince and Jeff about their experiences. And I'll say this that my background started off in biostatistics, and so it doesn't seem quite natural to say, how do you get from statistics to clinical implementation? So there was a little bit of a trajectory there, but working in biostatistics and starting in the data analysis end of family studies, where we were really trying to map out what are the genes that contribute to these different hereditary conditions. And so that's where my career started. And it is just actually really incredible to think about how far we have come from that point in time at the beginning of my career to where we are now, that we are actually able to really be implementing some of these technologies into clinical practice. It's just been an amazing period of time to go through in my career. And so I think we all, when we do science, want the work that we do to impact people. And so, there's just this strong desire for that to happen. And when I was a early faculty person at Case Western, one day the bioethics department came over to the biostatistics department with some questions about these new direct-to-consumer genetic tests that were coming out. And it just became fascinating to me. And if you really think about that, it is really about implementation and how are we delivering this genetic information to people. And it was a very different model that they were thinking about at that time. And from that, I ended up doing a mid-career fellowship at the CDC and with Muin Khoury in the Office of Public Health Genomics, and really had a wonderful fellowship and opportunity to do some retraining in the middle of my career. And then got an opportunity to move back to my hometown of Portland, Oregon, working at Kaiser Permanente in a research center that it was really embedded within a healthcare delivery system. And it just was an amazing time and opportunity to really have a chance to see how we're going to move these new technologies into clinical practice. So it really has been a lot of changes over a short period of time, and really just doing everything I can to keep up with where the field is.
Yeah. So, well, thanks to all of you. I just find it's always fascinating to get a sense of everybody's different sort of starting points, where in many cases we sort of meet on these sort of parallel or intersecting roads and that kind of thing. So yeah, thanks for at least indulging me and all of us for these with this wonderful background. So I see each of you as leaders, as folks who really convey the excitement and the promise of where the field has been, and certainly the rapid change and where the field can go. And so what I'd like to see if each of you might be able to weigh in on is what's most exciting to you right now as you're thinking about this goal of bridging genomics research and practice. And we'll vary the order. Why don't we start with Jeff and then Katrina and then Vince?
Okay, thanks for that question. And as I reflect on actually the time frame that all of us have been involved in this field, what was really a very, I would say, limited number of health systems that could actually use a genetic test, to today, where in some health systems genome sequencing is becoming almost routine. To me, to watch that happen over the last, particularly the last decade, has been enormously exciting to be part of it, but also to witness. Like I think we all, I'll just speak for myself, I won't speak for the other panelists, we're probably overly optimistic about the pace at which things would happen. But I think patience, patience has really paid off here to watch what's been happening, and we see the stories, particularly in the rare disease community, of not just people getting diagnosed, but getting cured through the implementation of widespread sequencing. And that goes to what Katrina said, the impact on patients and their families is enormously gratifying. Even if it's one step to remove, I like to, even if I hear the story and don't participate in it myself, I find that tremendously satisfying. And then finally, I would say that as particularly as we look at like the ACMG recommendations and the uptake of pharmacogenetics, the ability to, that we're shifting healthcare away from a very reactive and disease-focused paradigm to one that's more proactive and preventive, which I think has always been the vision for personalized and precision medicine. So those are some of my thoughts about what's exciting today, and I'm sure there's a lot more on the horizon.
Great. Katrina?
Yeah, I'm gonna focus in specifically on the cancer world since I'm sitting here at NCI and say what is really exciting to me about what's on the horizon is potentially new opportunities for intervention for hereditary cancer syndromes. So things like cancer vaccines, or different preventive options that we can use for these hereditary cancer syndromes in particular, I think is really exciting that, you know, how far we've come from not even knowing what the genes were, you know, at the beginning of my career to now talking about interventions like this is just very exciting. But I also want to say I'm excited about the potential for polygenic risk scores and combining that with other clinical information. And, you know, we spent a lot of time doing GWAS and looking at these common variants and now really being able to think about some potential for clinical application of that work is exciting to me.
Great. Vent?
So there is so much, and I would particularly just say when we think about the excitement for today, is thinking about issues around cancer treatment and oncology as the leading edge I see of how genomics is truly becoming integrated in clinical care. And so there's just so much that has happened over the 2 decades since the completion of the Human Genome Project with regards to new diagnostic screening, issues with regards to new treatment, you know, how we manage treatment of cancers, but treatment of other diseases. And I remember when I first got involved, there's a lot of questions that, you know, that the completion of the Genome Project, you know, genomics, there was a lot of hype and okay, is there going to be reality to that? And, you know, there was all kinds of questions raised, you know, the amount of money that went into this, you know, really is it going to benefit? And now we look back in 2023 of where we are from a clinical practice point of view and how genomics is integrated into clinical care. You know, I think it's just really it's mind blowing to exactly see what we're at. So one of the areas that's going forward that I'm really excited about is how we're moving from one reference genome to a diverse ancestral population of diverse genomes, and how that's going to play an important role in treatment. And so, you know, I think the future is bright, but if you just look at what has happened since 2003, you know, and even before that, with some of the treatments that were identified before the completion of the Human Genome Project, I think we are really in a really interesting place where implementation science is so important.
Great. Thanks so much for all of that. So with this excitement, I also hear in each of your stories this recognition that there have been challenges, there may remain challenges in really making the most of genomic applications within practice and within policy. And here, as I had mentioned to everyone who's on this call, we wanted to take a moment and give everybody a chance to weigh in. So you can see, hopefully, on the right side of your screen, Slido has popped up. And you now see a question that we'd like to just pause for a minute and give folks a chance to add your own voices to the conversation around what you see as the biggest challenge in translating genomics into clinical and community practice. And so we're going to be collecting this because, you all have so much to add to the conversation. Beyond this, of course, we'll want to entertain your questions. But right here, would love your answers to this particular question. And of course, as you're typing in, we have this chance to hear from our expert panelists their specific answers. So we're going to start with Katrina and then go to Vince and then to Jeff with what each of you sees as the biggest challenge in translating genomics into clinical and community practice. And please do type in your answers, everybody out there in cyberspace.
Yeah, thanks. So unfortunately, one of the things that I think is a challenge when we go to genomics meetings, we still have to talk about genomic medicine is medicine. And that trying to get past this idea of genetic exceptionalism, I think has been very difficult for the field. And really trying to get the concept of genomics as just part of medical care in the same way as everything else that happens within the healthcare delivery system, I think continues to be a challenge of just that basic concept.
Great, thank you. So Vince, your take.
I'm going to give two. my first and the number one is the inequities that I think exist today and will continue to exist going forward. As we think about what is happening at quaternary and tertiary academic healthcare centers, but how treatment is different and the actual utilization of genomics is different in other types of healthcare systems within our country. And so I see inequities with regards to who can actually benefit from the benefits of genomic knowledge and the various types of treatment from screening to actual diagnostics is, I think, a core challenge. And the second challenge, I think, is with regards to education and our ability to kind of integrate from a health professional education, the knowledge to actually uptake some of the new opportunities to use genomics within clinical care.
Great, thank you for that. Jeff.
Yeah, first I want to do a little level set, if it's okay with you. I think what we're talking about here is mainly genomics, but I want to just make the point that a lot of the challenges we're talking about are not unique to genomics or genomic medicine. I often like to think about the fact that the Framingham risk score for heart disease was first discovered, if you will, in the early 1960s. And was touted as by many professional organizations as something that should be used all the time to evaluate cardiovascular risk. And if you did a survey in early 2000s, you found that less than 50% of active primary care or specialty physicians were using that risk score. It wasn't only until the advent of the electronic health record that you could just essentially push a button and get it done. But before that, it was not so routine. So I just call that out as it's just an exemplar of some of the things, some of the challenges that other areas of medicine face. It's not unique to genomics. And I do have two areas to point to, like Vince, different than Vince. So one is, why should health systems make this investment? What's the value proposition for even the patient to agree to have a genetic test, for the providers to offer it, and for the health systems to integrate it into their IT system? So that leads to the topic of today, which is, how do we actually embrace the implementation science paradigms that are going to be necessary? Implementation science I think is a fairly new science, and it's probably not ubiquitously taken up by the technology people and the clinicians that need to make it work. So I would say evidence generation for value, and the implementation science is actually going to lead to the evidence generation.
Yeah, thanks for those. For everyone who did vote, what you should be able to see are enter your responses. You should be able to see all of the responses which have come in so far and are still coming in, which I think do underscore many of the points and extend upon them that we heard from Vince and Katrina and Jeff. inequities I see, or the challenge of equity as being definitely well represented, payment reimbursement issues, certainly some of the decision support tools needed, or the addressing misinformation or just challenges in communication across different systems, costs, accessibility of genomics, the solutions to work in all clinical settings as opposed to certain ones that may be better resourced. So yeah, this is great. And what we'll be doing certainly is pulling all this information, and as we do, we archive the webinars, and we'll be able to provide all of this information. We should be able to provide this information so everyone has a chance to benefit. So yeah, thank you all for that. And again, I think there's enthusiasm, there are challenges, and as Jeff said, there may be lessons learned across the board in how we overcome some of these challenges. And then there may be others that are very specific to genomic applications. So I want to sort of extend on something, Vince, that I think was integrated in your last response. And so one might define the success of translation as when all have access, right? When we get over this idea that this is something that's available to some, but really think about the sort of equitable future for genomics, for genomic medicine, et cetera. So wanted to just get each of your reads, and we'll start with Vince and then go to Katrina and then Jeff. How do you think about equity in the context of genomic medicine? What do you encourage people to start with? Or there's so many different issues, but would just love your sense of where do you begin?
Yeah, and I just want to agree with Jeff that there are other scientific disciplines and medical disciplines where these are the same questions. So, but from a genomics perspective, I think that there are a couple areas that we truly have challenges that we have not addressed yet. And one is with regards to understanding human genetic variation globally and understanding ancestral diversity. And, we still have a situation that the vast majority of participants in studies are from European ancestral backgrounds. And thinking about our global population, we're missing so much of the ancestral diversity. And that has adverse impact on everyone with regards to actually treatments. So I think the issues of research and who participates in research, I think is a core issue. I think a second issue is related to who's actually doing the research. And I think with regards to implementation science and genomics, this is both an opportunity, but I think a challenge we have that truly that the research workforce does not look like our country, does not look like our world. It does not have the diversity of views and cultures and experiences to bring to research questions and to understand issues. And I think that's a challenge from an equity perspective. But then the core is actually when it goes into practice, and when, I may go into one academic healthcare system and someone may go into a community or fairly qualified health center and have the same diagnosis. What is happening? What are the implementation issues of the science? So I think the issues of equity, of actual uptake and implementation is a challenge for our country.
Thanks for that, Vince. Katrina, same question to you. How do you think about equity in the context of genomic medicine?
Well, I agree with everything that Vince said, and so I'm just going to try to add on. And one thing that I want to mention is that particularly for implementation science conversation, that there is not a one-size-fits-all approach to how we deliver genomic medicine. And at the same time, when we tailor our approaches to such an extent that it becomes challenging for the health systems to actually be consistent in delivering care for everyone. We've kind of swung that pendulum too far in the other direction. And so we need to have some balance there between being able to recognize and approach the delivery of healthcare in a tailored way, but not to the extent that we actually interfere with the ability to serve populations. And so I think that is going to be the challenge for implementation scientists.
Great, thanks. Jeff?
This is a huge topic. I hope I can do some justice and, again, amplify on Vince and some of Katrina's comments. The first thing that comes to mind is if we want to have a diverse set of research participants to help us reduce the diversity gap in genomic databases as well as other research databases, we need to develop the trust of those populations as participants. And I don't proclaim expertise in this, but I think this is like the first step, is ensuring that individuals know how they're contributing and how their data is going to be used, and potentially what value they'll get back from being a participant. And that leads me to also think about sort of the healthcare divide and the digital divide as being significant issues. Many of our research participants get access to genomics or clinical studies because they are involved in healthcare delivery systems that are forward-thinking and offer those. But there are many underserved and underrepresented minorities that don't have access to healthcare and therefore may not ever have the opportunity to participate in the ways that we're talking about. So, and the digital divide, I think, is also a significant barrier here because, like it or not, we live in a fairly IT intense world, and that's how people get information. That's often how they, read their medical records or chat with their healthcare providers and the like. So I think we should just make sure that we don't lose sight of, those very fundamental issues that will get the researcher participants that are needed to close the genomic gap in databases that Benson alluded to participate. I would want to just make the plug for all of us, the All of Us research program, just for a second, saying that when we released our first 100,000 genomes last year, we were very pleased at the fact that about 50% of the individuals who shared their DNA and had their genome sequenced were self-identified as non-white, which is one of the largest, I think, data sets of that type, and it's only going to be amplified next month to about 230,000 genomes with hopefully a similar balance and representation. The second thing the other thing I wanted to amplify is I think, Vince, you made this point that we need to have underrepresented minority researchers at the table when we're talking about this, because I would say that if you ask a European ancestry or an African ancestry what their research questions might be, I think they will be quite different because they have very different lenses and perspectives on how the data that we're providing in research could be utilized by them. So I've rambled a little bit here, but I hope you got the gist of it. I think it's the various divides, the ability to engage and have participants as trusted partners in research, and the same holds true for the research community.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. And I did see, and if folks are looking at the chat, you may also see some wonderful comments in there about, adding to what we've already heard and involving providers who are providing genomic medicine and ensuring options are offered to all patients. So at this multiple levels of the system, making sure that equity is a strong theme throughout. It seems like I took both from your collective comments and what some of the folks have already said, either in the poll or within the chat. Want to turn my attention, and thanks to those of you who've already submitted questions, and keep them coming because we will take them as they come. First question that I see here. So epidemiology and surveillance can help us to understand where implementation science may be needed. Are there, or what are potential solutions to some lack of current data sources, whether it's national, population-based, to help us understand uptake reach of services like genetic counseling or for high-risk individuals? So curious about your assessment of the data that we need to best guide how we implement, where we implement, et cetera. Curious, actually, Jeff, maybe starting with you. Just you had mentioned all of us and the opportunities that there is for that research program to gather all sorts of data. Curious the degree to which you think it may fill some of these gaps, or does that need to leverage other data sources as well to get at the reach of some of our sort of genomic services?
Yeah, yes to both. So first of all of us is, when we reach our goal of 1 million, we'll only be representing 1/350th of the U.S. population, and probably we're intentionally over recruiting or over enrolling individuals from previously underrepresented groups that have not ever been in a biomedical research study. So I just want to, set the stage that for U.S. populations, we are going to have some baked in, somewhat intentional biases. And the kinds of data that we're collecting, the EHR information, electronic health record information, multiple surveys that are asking about access to care, social determinants of health, family history, and personal history, I think will, if they don't contribute to this particular person's answer to this question, they will set the stage for identifying certain gaps that probably will need national policy efforts from the CDC and other departments of public health to really help us address, fully where the gaps lie and where the information gaps lie, so that we can, fully realize the potential of genetics and genomics in healthcare. So I guess again, to summarize, I think all of us will make a significant contribution to addressing these issues, but will just be the beginning of a journey to get to the final result.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Katrina and then Vince, additional thoughts about solutions to overcoming lack of data?
Yeah, so in our division, we're really focusing on creating data linkages, which really requires a lot of work around development of standards and interoperability and data exchange. And so that is where I do feel that a whole of government approach would be beneficial. This is something that would be extremely difficult for individual systems to solve on their own, but is really something that I think is going to require this federally coordinated approach that will help support those kinds of data exchanges that allow us to link different kinds of data sources so that we can study their impact.
Great, and Vince?
I would just agree with Katrina's comments with regards to we really do need to work across agencies to help to have the type of data to answer the question of this individual. But I also would turn the question back to the individual, that this is the kind of implementation research opportunity I think that there is from an R01 grant perspective or initiatives of really actually trying to understand and study some of these questions to better understand where we are today. But it is going to require, agencies that are not just NIH to be involved, to really have the ability to transfer the data in the way that I think that the questionnaire is hoping for in the future.
Yeah, thanks for that. And it actually leads to a related question. So if, whether it's the all of government approach or the larger group of people sitting around the table to try and say, how do we overcome some of these challenges or these lack of data? Curious to hear from each of you, how can we increase collaboration? So just seeing the names and recognizing a lot of the folks who are tuning in, some might define themselves more in the genomic space. Others might say, I would be more in the implementation science space and leaning toward. Would love to have each of your advice for our group about how do we increase collaborations between genomics researchers or genomic experts, aficionados, et cetera, and implementation scientists, experts, aficionados. So let's see, why don't we start with Vince and then go Katrina and then Jeff on that one, the collaboration question.
No, this is a huge issue, an issue that we need to understand better. But I do want to just kind of give a spotlight on our institute and some of our initiatives that we've had over the years, where we were intentionally bringing together genomic scientists with health services researchers, implementation scientists, with other areas. So thinking about Emerge and Caesar and some of the initiatives that really were looking at those kinds of questions. And we need more of those. As NIH, where we are providing opportunity for researchers from different disciplinary backgrounds to come together and focus on a question. And so I would say this is one area where I think there's opportunities within NIH for us to think about what we can do to help facilitate. But for individuals within their academic institution or their organization, of how they can build bridges with some of their colleagues in different areas with regards to work that they're doing. So I think we can do this at both areas. One is, I think as a research agency, we can do some things to help facilitate this. But I think individuals, going down the hall, going to the other building, making connections is a way also to move forward.
Thanks, Vince. Katrina.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think coming from the field of biostatistics from the very beginning of my career, it's been team science all the way, and that is what we need, and that is what moves our field forward. And I think we have really moved far in the past few decades around team science. I think there are still incentives that are not aligned with promoting team science. So to the extent that our institutions can promote team science in career advancement, et cetera, I think that would be valuable. And I also would encourage everyone to really embrace what you don't know, and that coming to the table as part of a team and not knowing part of what this team needs, I think is actually a valuable asset for the team. Because when everyone is talking the same language and you're all in your silo, I think you actually can be less creative and less productive as a team than when you're having to bridge those gaps. So I would tell everyone to embrace what you don't know.
Love it. Yeah, the humility that we should all carry in abundance. Sounds like Jeff. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I have two concrete recommendations, I guess, and one that's more aspirational. So on the concrete side, I think we should be intentional about having implementation science at our national meeting, Genomics national meetings, as a session, not leave it to chance. And I think the reverse is true. We should encourage the implementation science community to bring genomic researchers into their national meetings so that it's it's very clear what the agenda is in that regard. And then the other more concrete recommendation would be for us as funders is, again, to be intentional about the requirements. I think, Vince, you alluded to this, that applicants to a particular funding call must have implementation scientists and genomic researchers working together. That's not an option. I mean, we can create funding streams that would make that requirement. On the more aspirational side of things, when I think about implementation science as from the academic and researcher perspective, what I realize is that industry and us actually are very aligned in to make that happen. And I say that because, well, they call it marketing, right? In order for a genetic test to be taken up by patients, providers, and healthcare systems, industry needs to market it. So my point is, I think that there's a real opportunity for us to work more closely together with industry on validated and robust genetic testing platforms to do the implementation science that will benefit the health system and the patients and the participants, as well as maybe move the agenda forward for that particular commercial firm. That's just a thought.
Great. No, thanks. Appreciate both the concrete and the aspirational. Healthy doses of both. So sort of a related question to I love the concepts around team science. So again, we have people who are tuning in today, who are at different stages within their career trajectory. And so often there is this challenge that we hear from early career investigators, that they feel like they can't quite engage until they get to a certain place within their career, and then they might be able to broaden their horizons. And so just wondering what advice you might have for early career investigators who are tuning in, who are wanting to work more in this interface between implementation science and genomics, where would you encourage them to go? Maybe we can start with Katrina, and then Jeff, and then Vince.
Okay, start with Jeff. Come back to me.
Okay.
With me?
Or,
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. One thing I would say right off the bat is early stage investigators should be working with Katrina, Vince, and David. Really as leaders in this field. And I also think that NIH, with their commitment to implementation science, particularly with your roles and David's role, I think that's I'm not kidding. I think there's a lot of opportunities to learn about what's under the hood of implementation science at NIH for those that are interested in more of a public organization. But we mentioned the Ignite network, the NHGRI Ignite network. There are at least a half a dozen or more institutions that are funded by NHGRI to do implementation science research in genomics. And if nothing else, talking to the lead investigators of those and their other teammates as a first step, and potentially even doing some work with them, I think would be terrific. So and as I said before, go to the implementation science meetings if you're a genomics researcher. Go to the genomics meetings if you're an implementation scientist, and make it happen. Take the initiative.
Great.
I agree totally with Jeff on everything he said, and going to the meetings and how they can play such an important role. I also would encourage you to think about this from a perspective of making yourself much more competitive. So not to take the position that this is going to take away from my primary scientific area, but this is an opportunity really truly to expand your science and your competitiveness. And so to use that as a challenge as you're developing your career. But I think reaching out and talking to people, reading papers and calling up people, and with Zoom now, it's so much easier to reach people across the world in conversations are steps that junior investigators could take.
Great. Katrina.
Okay, so I would encourage folks to find projects and programs that are ongoing that you might be able to connect with. And there are often many ancillary studies and additional things that could be done with a particular project that there just isn't capacity with the existing team to do. And so I think that is a good way to get started with some infrastructure already in place that you can leverage, and then bring some fresh ideas to that of how you might enhance what they're doing, or add an additional question to what's happening with that team already. And finding people that you like to work with is also really helpful. That it just makes the experience of the team science that much more fun. So, don't be afraid to go around and meet people and talk to people and find who do you connect with, and just learn more about what they're doing, and be creative about adding on some additional questions to what is already happening.
Yeah, great suggestions across the board. And maybe just to add one, the reason why many of us are sitting in these NIH buildings is to be as helpful as we hopefully can be to everyone across their career. So never hesitate. I'll speak for myself, to reach out to me if I can help to connect anyone with others who might share an interest and find mutual benefit. That's certainly why I'm here, and I know I can speak for others on this call and beyond. So great advice. So you'll see. Oh yeah, Jeff.
Sorry, there's one word that didn't come up, which I think is baked into a thread through everything that we've been saying, but I think mentorship is we didn't mention, and particularly as you're talking about early career investigators, to be deliberate about having a mentor, that is in this field that can really help with the guidance. It just seems like an obvious thing, but worth mentioning.
Great. So we're heading into our rapid response round because I noticed that there are a few additional questions that have popped up and want to make sure that we have a chance to get these good questions answered. So maybe I'll just try and I'll put out the question, which I think may have a logical first respondent, and then we can see if anyone else has anything to add. So first question that I'm seeing right here from a doctoral student in implementation science who's heading to ACMG. Are there informal, or I suppose formal, are there opportunities to meet people at ACMG who would be interested in this intersection between genomics and implementation science? Anyone?
Yes, I think there are sessions that I would look over the agenda and go to the specific sessions, and as well as the posters, finding the people who are presenting the posters on the topics that you're interested in and going up and chatting with those folks. But there are also, ACMG in particular has a lot of educational opportunities that you can tap into while you're at the meeting. So I would pay careful attention to the agenda, and there's a whole bunch of ancillary meetings and opportunities and things that you can tap into to meet people.
Okay, great. There's another question that I think is specific for Jeff and for all of us, and just asks, and I think it reflects a lot of the discussion on equity, but the question says, do the All of Us questionnaires include specific racism experience questions or measures?
Yes, I mentioned that we launched a social determinants of health questionnaire. All of our questionnaires are available on the All of Us website, so I won't go into the specific kinds of questions that are asked, but having seen it and also answered it, I can be very affirmative that many questions around an individual's personal experience with racism are asked in many different ways. So thanks for the question.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for the question. Okay, and then I see that there's another question, and maybe starting with Vince, Katrina, and certainly Jeff, feel free to weigh in as well. Someone had just said, what does the immediate future look like in terms of genomic medicine and its implication for better treatments and prevention for hereditary cancer? Anything come to mind just to whet the questioner's appetite as to, are there things that you've seen that you're excited about that are advances around hereditary cancer?
So I'll just start and then really go to Katrina from the perspective of being at NCI and knowing exactly what's going on. You see a clear difference, I think, today than 10 years ago with regards to how an understanding with regards to heredity. I think one of the challenges that continues is with regards to patient populations that are not been a part of the research, who are getting more variants of unknown significance when they are getting testing with regards to risk with regards to hereditary breast cancer or other types of cancers. So I think there's a challenge there, but there's clearly a lot of exciting things going on, and I'll leave that to Katrina.
Yeah, one thing I want to focus on is scalability. And I really think that we need to think about how to implement genomic medicine in a way that can reach many more people, magnitudes more people than we are reaching right now. And so I think that is again, not unique to genomics, but something that we need to think about. How are we going to scale what we're doing? And I think also I think where we are at the moment is there has been a ton of work done on getting the genetic test done in the first place, reporting the result to the individual. But we really need to focus on what happens next and supporting people in maintaining the care that they need once a diagnosis of a hereditary condition has been made. And so I think that's kind of where we're at right at the moment.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, Jeff, yeah, please.
Even though I'm not in the NCI, I want to address Katrina's scalability question with something that's quite retro, which is family history. Not surprising that I mentioned this because this has been an area of research of mine for many decades, but I think getting an adequate 3-generation at least family history could be a very inexpensive way to get cancer and other types of risk information in the hands of our patients and participants, even if at scale. So just a plug for family history.
Cool. And maybe just to add that one of the other things that NCI, I sort of briefly mentioned the moonshot, but within the moonshot, we had the ability, and thanks to leaders within our division, to develop a couple of RFAs, requests for applications, that generated studies that are really trying to deal with the scalability from testing through sort of cascade screening to really try and say what kind of population benefit can we have in hereditary cancers. So some of those studies are actually working their way toward the end, and so I would think that we'll have an exciting complement to what's already been done before. I do also see in the chat that others have responded to that question, not just that there's ACMG, but also there was questions about ASHG, American Society of Human Genetics, I think, is that
Yes.
right? And then
Yes.
APHA and the National Society of Genetic Counselors also being places where these kind of these dialogues can continue. So realizing that we only have just a couple of minutes left, and I know that there are a couple of questions that we're not necessarily going to be able to get to. Just wanted to ask one final question, and that's just really, any sort of suggested resources or any, or even just, I would say, any suggested resources that you go to as you're thinking about the sort of advance of genomics into practice that you'd encourage others to take a look at as well. Maybe we can go down the line of Vince and then Katrina and then Jeff.
So I'm going to go with a practical one from a perspective of conducting research, and that's the Phoenix database of various measures, of trying to have more consistent measures across studies, so that you're then able to compare your data, that if you're not familiar with Phoenix, that you should become familiar with Phoenix. One is more NIH institutes are now requiring the use of these common elements, but also just to help you in thinking about some of the questions that you may be asking in a way that can be consistent across studies.
Great. Katrina.
Great. Yeah. I do want to put in a plug also for some of the resources developed through our division. And so really encourage everyone to take a look at our website. We even have newsletters that you can sign up for, where you will be proactively receiving information about opportunities. And to give a plug for the training and implementation science that David leads and others within our division lead and really contribute to, if that's something that you'd like to learn more about. And then I'd also like to also give a plug for professional societies, which has been so important to my career in terms of getting to know other people in the field, getting opportunities for leadership and working together on tackling different problems on behalf of our professional societies. So I think that is a great place to learn and also to contribute back to your professional organization.
Great, thanks. Jeff?
Yeah, in less than 30 seconds. So I would definitely follow the NHGRI Division of Genomic Medicine activities and anything that they're either putting out as funding announcements or meetings that they are contributing to or sponsoring. And the second is the National Academies of Medicine Genomics and Precision Health Roundtable, has been strongly focused on this. We've had David and Katrina as speakers and Vince as an active member. So that roundtable puts on workshops several times a year and other publications that I think would be quite valuable to this audience.
Great. Well, seeing that we are right at or just about to be at the top of the hour, want to say huge thank you to the three of you for joining us in this great dialogue, which we intend to continue. Thanks so much to everybody who has continued actually the dialogue in the chat. And I'm just seeing really wonderful additional ways of sort of spotlighting some of the key issues that we want to deal with in the future. And so lots of excitement, lots of enthusiasm, and yet lots of work to be done that I know everyone who's listening will have a part in conducting. So maybe with that, I'll turn it over to Anita to close us out.
Thank you to our speakers for this great conversation today. As a reminder, an archive of today's session will be available shortly. So thank you again, and you may disconnect at this time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.